apparently had no interest in filming the novel again at the time. Few science fiction films were actually made in the 1940s, and it may have also been thought that at the time when we were involved in a real-life world war, that it might not have been in good taste, or that people might not necessarily be interested in a film about a fictional invasion from somewhere else. However, late in 1951, things were different, and the project was resurrected by producer George Pal. George Pal was born in Hungary and emigrated to the United States from Europe at the outbreak of World War II. He was primarily, the first 2 decades of his career, an animator. He worked in dimensional animation, making advertising films and animated shorts called puppetoons, utilizing articulated models. He moved into live-action feature film production in 1950, but he retained an interest in special effects. In fact, 3 of the first 4 movies that he produced, including The War of the Worlds, won Academy Awards for Best Special Effects. Pal's later films included The Naked Jungle, with Charlton Heston trying to avoid army ants in the Amazon, and The Time Machine. The director of The War of the Worlds was a man named Byron Caston, who had worked in Hollywood since the early 1920s, but primarily as a photographer and a special effects technician until the late 40s when he became a director. A number of the films he made after The War of the Worlds were science fiction or fantasy, and he also worked with George Pal several more times. The War of the Worlds was released in 1953 and was very popular. At the time, color films were not routine, so this, the fact that it was made in color, the fame of the original novel, the 1938 broadcast, the current interest in science fiction movies, helped in no small part by some of the things we talked about last week, the flying saucer, real-life sightings of flying saucers, the great technological and scientific advances that had been made during and after World War II, the tense geopolitical situation and so forth. These all helped contribute to the film's success. The War of the Worlds, the film, uses some of the novel's basic ideas, but essentially builds a new story on top of them with a different setting, different events, different characters. Both the novel and the film are about projectiles containing Martians landing on Earth, and then the Martians come out and they use their fantastic war machines to attack the human race and attempt to conquer Earth. The hero of the book and the hero of the movie spends much of his time searching for a particular woman amid the widespread destruction of the Earth, and the downfall of the Martians results from a similar cause both in Wells' original story and in the screenplay of the film. There's also a few inside jokes in the film relating to the 1938 radio broadcast. All movies are formed to some extent by the period in which they're made, and The War of the Worlds, as it is in 1953, is quite different than the film would have been had it been made in the 1920s or 1930s when it was originally conceived. First, although World War I was very horrific and deadly, mass destruction of cities by aerial bombardment and artillery, not to mention the atomic bomb, truly reached its height during the Second World War. Thus, audiences in theaters in the 1950s were familiar with scenes of ruined cities and destruction, and The War of the Worlds evokes this memory and even uses World War II stock footage at times. Furthermore, the emphasis in this film on the aliens' aerial weapons, as opposed to the walking tripods of the novel, the emphasis on the aerial weapons not only echoes World War II, which was very aviation-oriented warfare, it also ties in with the current interest in the early 1950s in flying saucers. Now, these Martian machines are not precisely flying saucers, but neither are they mechanical walking tripods. They're closer to flying saucers than they are to tripods. Another difference between the original novel and the film is the depiction and the behavior of the aliens themselves. In Wells' original book, the Martians are described as something similar to sort of large lobby octopuses, and they do nasty things such as draining captive humans of blood. In the late 1940s, animator Ray Harryhausen, whose work we shall see next week in Earth versus the Flying Saucers, did an animation test of a scene that he envisioned from The War of the Worlds, combining the H.G. Wells image of a Martian with his own ideas. 1953 film, the aliens, who were very rarely seen, they seem to have anticipated the motto of the Daleks from the Doctor Who television series that came a few years later. They prefer to just exterminate the puny Earthlings they come across. There's no concept of them actually wanting to enslave human beings or drain their blood or something like that. As I say, they're only very briefly seen, but when you do see them, they bear a vague resemblance to a certain friendly alien who appeared on the screen 30 years later. The War of the Worlds and other science fiction films of the 1950s were generally not sold on star power. Instead, the exciting concept, the monsters, the special effects were the drawing points. And just to illustrate that, the last clip that I have tonight is the original trailer for the film.
This could be the beginning of the end for the human race. For what men first thought were meteors or the often ridiculed flying saucers are in reality the flaming vanguard of the invasion from Mars.
Looks like they're gonna come out of that gully pretty soon. We'll have to rush our defenses to be ready when they do.
The guard can need plenty of reinforcements.
We'll get them. Lieutenant, look!
They slash across country like scythes, wiping out everything that's trying to get away from them.
That explains why communication is cut the moment their machines begin moving.
Montreal's blacked out. Nothing more's come through.
Same thing that happened on the Pacific coast. Anything from them yet?
No, Mr. Secretary, we've had nothing from San Francisco for over 5 hours.
The nations of the world mobilize their armed might, rushing to defend the Earth against the unknown weapons of the super race from the Red Planet. Is there nothing that can stop the Martian death machines?
Guns, tanks, bombs. They're like toys against them.
We know now that we can't beat their machine. We've got to beat them.
All over the world, human beings cower before the onslaught of these unearthly enemies, whom no one has ever seen. Panic that sweeps around the globe as the great masses of mankind flee blindly in a headlong stampede of hysteria.
You'll notice that the trailer doesn't mention any of the actors at all. And the majority of the footage plays up the technicolor spectacle, the mighty panorama of earth-shaking fury, as they say, of the Martian attack, the Earth's response, people's panic, etc., without giving away too many of the good scenes. So, as I said, you can see this was sold on the fact that it was a very colorful, exciting movie, not necessarily a serious drama that you really care about the specific people. The War of the Worlds stars Gene Barry, who would later go on to considerable success on television, and the gentleman died fairly recently. However, at the time, he was basically unknown. He had been a Broadway actor, dancer, he only had a couple of film credits at this time, and his co-star, actress named Ann Robinson, really had a very minor acting career in the 1950s and early 60s, never even achieving the modest level of success that Gene Barry had. It's interesting, it's kind of nice that both Gene Barry and Ann Robinson were given roles in the 2005 remake of The War of the Worlds, cameo appearances, a nice gesture on the part of director Steven Spielberg, presumably. As I just said, The War of the Worlds was made again as a theatrical feature film in 2005 with Tom Cruise as a star. This version returned to the original concept of tripod walking alien machines, and it also added several other bits from the novel, such as a Martian plant called Red Weed that they brought was taking over the Earth, and Martians using Earth people as unwilling broad donors. And this, the 2005 War of the Worlds, also paid tribute to the 1938 radio broadcast by having the Martians first land on Earth in New Jersey. So it's nice that there was a little bit of a sense of history on the part of Spielberg. There have been many, many other versions of the War of the Worlds, including television series, comic books, even a concept album of music and narration that was originally done in the late 1970s with Richard Burton doing the narration, and songs about the War of the Worlds, etc. And that was later turned into a fairly elaborate stage presentation in the 2000s. So it's not exactly a musical like The Sound of Music or My Fair Lady, but it's more of a light show, and you have a giant tripod machine on the stage and things like that. So it's kind of interesting. So it seems that H.G. Wells' novel, written in 1898, the basic title and concept, at least, will be with us for quite some time to come. All right, it's just about time to dim the lights for tonight's film. Let me first remind you that next week is, sadly, the last Hirshhorn summer camp session of the year. Earth versus the Flying Saucers will be the movie. It has special effects by Ray Harryhausen. We actually showed this a few years ago on the summer camp when we had the Ray Harryhausen series, but I think you'll enjoy that. As I said, tonight's a sort of big budget, color, spectacular. Earth versus the Flying Saucers is more of a B picture, but it has some really spectacular special effects of animation of the flying saucers. So it's certainly worth watching. I hope to see you then. So thanks for coming out to the 2011 Hirshhorn Museum Sculpture Garden Summer Camp Film Festival, and enjoy tonight's